When the options are separated graphically, they are usually called buttons instead of menus. When each button causes a command to be executed, they are often called action buttons or command buttons. Here are some examples.
The Xerox development environment provides command buttons that are used in panels of controls known as a form window. Visually, command items are set off from other items by a trailing exclamation point. Command items highlight on mouse button down and execute on button up. If the cursor is moved off before the button is released, then the command item is not executed.
In Star, command buttons appear only on title bars. Command buttons are highlighted on mouse button down and executed on mouse button up. The command is not executed if the cursor is moved off of the command button before the mouse button is released. There are never any non-functioning menu commands, that is, grayed out commands. If the command doesn't make sense in the current context, then it isn't visible. This means that some command buttons will appear and disappear depending upon the state of the object. There's a standard set of command buttons that are widely used. These buttons are always laid out in the same order so the user can easily find them. Any additional buttons required by an application are appended to the right of the standard set.
The one special case of property sheet-like things are these command items, which appear in a number of different applications. Again, these are fixed menus, behave very much like it: cancel by rolling off, select by just letting go over it, hold still. The prompt appears in the prompt window with information about it. Actually selecting it will cause it to gray out while the activity is happening and go white again while it is, when it's finished.
Cedar tools use a variety of button types. One-click buttons simply invoke an operation. Guarded buttons require a second confirming click. Two-state buttons can encode and display on-off state in an application. Cycling or multi-state buttons provide a similar function for a small number of states. Graphics buttons display state graphically. User-extensible menus are provided by the Tioga Buttons facility, in which buttons are managed and displayed as formatted text using the Tioga document editor.
Macintosh push buttons are used to issue commands to the computer. When pressed, a push button highlights to show that releasing the mouse button will issue the command. If you press a button, then move outside, the button will unhighlight to show that releasing outside the button will not issue the command. At any given time, one button may be outlined to denote that it is the default button, in which case pressing the return key is a shortcut for clicking on the button itself.
In the alternate reality kit, buttons are these bezel-shaded objects that can be picked up, carried over, and dropped to attach to any object on the screen. Pressing the middle button while the finger is over a button causes the button to be activated. These buttons themselves are physical objects, so they can be acted on in turn by other buttons.
Dialog box commands are carried out by moving the mouse over the action push button and pressing the left mouse button. Such commands are canceled by using the same method to select the cancel push button. A help push button is also available, which will bring up dialog boxes providing various levels of contextual help. Default keyboard action allows the user to select to carry out the default command by pressing the Enter key and to cancel the command by pressing the Escape key.
Buttons in OpenLook are operated entirely with the Select mouse button. When the button is depressed, it previews. When the button is released, the action occurs. The button is grayed while the action is taking place. As with other controls in OpenLook, moving the pointer off the button and releasing the mouse button safely cancels the interaction.
These are buttons on the next computer. Buttons allow the user to perform actions within the application. When the user clicks on a button, it is highlighted. The button tracks the mouse until the user lets up on the mouse button. If the user lets up while the mouse is inside the button, the action is performed. If the user lets up while the mouse is outside the button, the action is not performed. The arrow on the OK button indicates that hitting the return key is equivalent to pressing this button. The leftmost button is disabled, showing that the function it represents is not available to the user. This is indicated by the gray title.
Here we have an iconic view with a set of command buttons along the bottom. These buttons act on the current selection. So I select the PostScript printer, choose the default button, and set the PostScript printer to be my default printer. These buttons are lit with a diffuse lighting model, unlike the harsh over-the-shoulder lighting model provided by some 3D buttons. This is more suited to the diffuse lighting model of the normal office environment.
Motif push buttons are armed by pressing mouse button 1. When armed, push buttons appear sunk into the screen. When unarmed, they appear to project outwards. Armed push buttons are activated when the mouse button is released. To disarm a push button without activating it, move outside the push button, then release the mouse button. From the keyboard, Motif's input focus is moved from button to button with the arrow keys. Buttons may be activated from the keyboard by using the space bar, or if a mnemonic character has been defined, by pressing the mnemonic. Buttons may also be activated from the keyboard by using application-defined accelerator keys, or by pressing the space bar when the button has the input focus. When an accelerator key has been defined for a button, the button's legend will incorporate the symbol for the accelerator.
We have in dialog boxes defined some standard sets of buttons. Most common are the use of OK, Apply, and Cancel buttons, as are shown in the bottom left-hand corner of this dialog box. The Apply button will apply the current settings and leave the dialog box where it is. The Cancel button will cancel the dialog box completely. The OK will do an apply and then remove the dialog box. These buttons can be positioned down along the bottom left or along the right side of a dialog box. And you can see when a button is pressed, it highlights. That's a regular button, the Apply button. The OK button, you can see, has a double highlighting around it, shows it's the default button, and will be activated not only by the mouse, but you can press the return key on the keyboard to activate a default button.